You know that moment when someone says their name and you immediately realize you're not going to remember it, not because you didn't hear it, not because you don't care, but because something inside your brain just didn't store it. And what's strange is this: you can almost feel it slipping away in real time, like the information enters your awareness and quietly exits before it ever becomes solid. No alarm, no warning, just gone. And a few seconds later, your brain starts doing something very predictable. It tries to recover it, reconstruct it, fill the gap with anything that feels plausible. And when that fails, you default to the same behavior: smiling, nodding, avoiding the name entirely. And later, when the interaction is over, you tell yourself, "I'm just bad with names." But that explanation is too simple because it assumes a memory failure, when in reality, this is not a memory problem at all. It is an attention allocation problem, and more specifically, a prioritization failure inside a system that is constantly overloaded. Here's what is actually happening. When you meet someone new, your brain is not storing information. It is constructing a live simulation of the person in real time: their facial expression, their tone, their emotional state, their social intention, and at the same time, it is also running a simulation of you, how you are being perceived, whether you are being awkward, whether you are doing this correctly, whether you should adjust your behavior. This is not one process. It is multiple systems competing for a very limited resource: working memory. And working memory is extremely small, much smaller than people intuitively assume. So when someone introduces themselves, their name enters a system that is already saturated, and your brain has to make a decision instantly: what gets priority and what gets dropped. And unfortunately for names, they usually lose that competition, because a name, in that exact moment, has almost no functional value. It doesn't predict behavior, it doesn't describe personality, it doesn't improve your understanding of the situation. It is just a label attached to a person you don't yet understand. And the brain does not prioritize unlabeled data under load. It prioritizes meaning. This is where the Baker-Baker paradox becomes important. In studies, researchers found something surprising. If you meet someone and learn they are a baker, you are more likely to remember it. But if you meet someone whose last name is Baker, you are more likely to forget it. Same word. Completely different memory outcome. Because Baker, the profession, immediately creates a network of associations: bread, kitchen, morning routine, smell, visual imagery, emotional context. But Baker, the name, creates nothing. No structure, no connection, no meaning. And without meaning, the brain discards it. Not because it is flawed, but because it is efficient. It only stores what connects. Everything else is noise. And that leads to a deeper misunderstanding most people have about memory. They assume memory is a storage system for important things. But it is not. It is a compression system for meaningful things. And meaning is not the same as importance. Meaning is connection. So if something connects to your existing mental model, it gets stored. If it doesn't, it gets dropped. And names are one of the weakest forms of information in that system. But there is another layer happening at the same time, and this one is even more subtle. Because forgetting names is not random. It is heavily influenced by internal attention structure. When you are in a social interaction, your attention is almost never fully present. Part of it is listening, but another part is observing yourself. How am I coming across? Did I say that too fast? Am I being too quiet? Should I smile more? And this self-monitoring system consumes the same cognitive resources that are needed for encoding memory. So when the name is delivered, it is competing with internal noise, and split attention produces a very specific effect, poor encoding quality, which means later you don't feel like you forgot the name. You feel like it never fully existed in the first place, because it never stabilized into memory. It only passed through awareness briefly and disappeared. There is also a timing problem happening underneath this. Psychologists call it the next in line effect. When your brain is preparing your response, your memory for incoming information drops significantly because part of your cognition is already simulating the future, not the present. So in conversations, your brain is constantly switching between modes: listening, predicting, planning, monitoring. And the name is often delivered at the exact moment when cognitive stability is lowest, which makes it one of the worst types of information for memory encoding. Not socially, but neurologically. And here is where things become more interesting, because this does not affect everyone equally. People who are highly socially aware often forget names more frequently, not less. And that seems counterintuitive. Until you understand what social awareness actually does. It increases the number of variables being tracked simultaneously: tone, emotion, facial microsignals, context shifts, implied meaning, future conversational structure, so attention becomes richer but more fragmented. And when attention becomes fragmented, simple labels lose priority. So the brain becomes extremely good at understanding people, but less efficient at storing their names. Not because anything is wrong, but because the system is optimized differently, and all optimization involves trade-offs. But socially, this creates a false interpretation. When you forget someone's name, it feels like a message about attention, about respect, about interest. But cognitively, it is none of those things. It is simply a failure of encoding under cognitive load, nothing more. And ironically, the brain that forgets the name has often stored far more information about the person than it is given credit for. Their tone, their expression, their emotional signals, their conversational patterns, a specific reaction they had, a subtle detail that stood out emotionally, because those elements are structured. They connect, and connected information is what memory actually preserves, which leads to something even deeper. Memory is not a recording of reality. It is a reconstruction of meaning. And that means something uncomfortable. You are not remembering people as they were. You are remembering the version of them your brain constructed as meaningful. Everything else is compressed or lost automatically, without permission, without awareness. And that also explains why certain memories feel extremely vivid, even when they are incomplete or distorted. Because emotional intensity acts like a storage amplifier. It forces encoding, even if the representation is inaccurate. So the brain is not optimizing for truth. It is optimizing for relevance and efficiency. And that optimization produces blind spots, especially for neutral information like names. Now there is one more subtle mechanism that makes this even more persistent. Once you believe you are bad with names, you begin to allocate slightly less attention to names in real time. Not consciously, but behaviorally, just enough to matter. And that small reduction guarantees more forgetting, which then reinforces the belief, and the loop continues. But breaking that loop is not about memory training. It is about forcing a connection at the moment of encoding, repeating the name immediately, linking it to something visual, creating structure where none existed. Because you are not improving memory itself, you are improving encoding conditions. And that distinction matters because one feels like identity, and the other is just mechanism. There's also one more layer that almost nobody notices. And it might explain why this feels so personal when it happens. Because in the moment someone says their name, you genuinely feel like you are paying attention. You are looking at them. You are nodding. You are engaged. From the inside, it feels like full awareness. But attention is not binary. It is not either on or off. It can feel present while actually being distributed across multiple internal processes, which creates a false sense of encoding. You believe the information is being stored because you were mentally there. But being there is not the same as storing, and this gap is where most social memory failures happen. Not absence of attention, but illusion of attention, and that illusion is very convincing because it comes with all the right signals: eye contact, micro responses, social engagement. Your brain interprets these as proof of memory formation, but they are not. They are just proof of interaction, not encoding. And that distinction is why names slip through so easily, even in people who are otherwise extremely attentive. So when you look at it honestly, forgetting names is not a sign of disinterest. It is not a sign of low intelligence. And it is not even really a memory flaw. It is a timing problem, a prioritization problem, and a structural limitation of how attention behaves under load. And once you understand that, the experience changes completely, because what used to feel like a personal failure starts to look like something mechanical, predictable, human, and shared by almost everyone. The final irony is this: the same brain that forgets names is often the same brain that remembers people more deeply than it realizes, just not through labels. Through meaning, through emotional structure, through context. Because in the end, a name was never the most important part of a person. It was just the easiest part to say, not the easiest part to remember. If this changed how you think about memory even slightly, you'll probably like the kind of content I make here. I break down how attention, behavior, and perception actually work underneath everyday life in a way most people never really think about. So if that's interesting to you, you can subscribe, and I'll see you in the next one.